FA Cup replays have been scrapped from the first round onwards, and the final will be played before the end of the Premier League campaign as part of several changes made to the competition from next season. The FA and the Premier League have reached a 6-year agreement over the changes. Well, good for them, say members of the EFL, because certain owners and chairmen of EFL clubs are saying it would have been nice to know. The Peterborough chairman and owner, Darragh McAntony, a regular on this show, was quick to respond. We're now at the stage where the big boys don't even bother to notify us or talk through proper changes like the ones announced regards the FA Cup. I have no idea what the Premier League or the FA are even thinking of pulling this move, the way it's unfolded. If this is a sign of things to come, then expect a full-on fallout within English football coming soon, all caused by one faction of our game. So, absolute ructions after this announcement. I just wonder what this man thinks this morning, because he's had, if you like, a foot in both camps. The former FA chairman and now chairman of Tranmere Rovers, Mark Palios, joins us live. I think, Mark, you were former FA chief exec, were you not? Good morning to you. Mark, what's your reaction to what we now know?
Good morning, Jim. Good morning, guys. If you saw our statement, our club statement yesterday, it basically set out where I am personally on it. I think there are two issues here. One is the actual decision itself and what it means for the competition, for fans and for lower league clubs. And the second element to it, which you could actually say is actually more important, is the governance issues, the way in which it was decided. And I think that's the position that we need to really start to look at. Especially in the light of the what I would call Part 6 of the independent regulator bill that's about to go through Parliament. Because unbeknownst to people, and people don't realise, when you see the governance that we've seen in play here, the bill as currently drafted starts to, I can go into more detail if you want, your listeners may not want to hear that, but the bill as currently drafted only allows the EFL and the EPL to raise the backstop rights. Now, I would argue that the EFL doesn't represent the 72 clubs. And recently, the FA coming out after the response yesterday, I think they threw the EFL under the bus on the basis that they were saying that, well, we agreed it with the Professional Game Board, and who sits on the Professional Game Board but the chair of the EFL? Yet there was no consultation with the EFL clubs about something which I think is relatively important.
And specifically on that, Mark, what's your view of that?
Well, I think that's outrageous. I would imagine, I can only speculate the reason for it is that they felt that they might have had a lot of opposition. That's the whole point of consultation, to get the views of people.
Yes. Simon, it seems that this is just the start of what's going to be a major bust-up, I think. I mean, the very language used by Darragh McAntony, and you know Darragh, he's not shy. He's saying it's time to show some minerals in how we respond to these events. Ignoring us lower down the pyramid is not a sensible route to take going forward.
Well, I mean, that all depends. That's all based upon what you actually mean by minerals and what you actually can do. And the question I would ask Mark is, to some extent, Mark, isn't this manna for heaven to some extent? Because this gives grist to the elbow of the independent regulator and what you may be able to lean on the independent regulator to be able to achieve. Because on one hand, you've got the Premier League and the FA really, I think, are the bigger culprits in this, because they're supposed to be the de facto protector of the game. But you've got a situation where this kind of behaviour, you've just said that the assertion has been that the EFL chairman has been in fact in agreement with this, which is either a truth or an untruth. So I would suggest it's probably an untruth for the purpose of this conversation. But do not think with this kind of positioning that actually helps the arguments about the length and breadth of the regulator's powers.
Absolutely, Simon, you're spot on. It's a misstep, I think, by if I call them the powers that be. This is a classic example of poor governance. Governance, if you want a definition of it, it's all stakeholders are confident in the decision-making process. Well, clearly all stakeholders haven't been addressed. Now, if I just come back to the FA, what you see there is we've just gone through a fan-led review. If you're looking at the impact of the decision, I'll just take replays as one of the elements, and one of the main elements has caused concern. That has two different impacts. One is the financial impact to lower league clubs, And two is the impact on the fan experience, because how many fans can relate to, giant killing acts, etc., from years and years ago?
Yes.
So they never consulted with fans, which I think is just an absolute. It's just having gone through a fan-led review and getting us to that position. So yes, you're right. I think this is a classic example. Now, if you go to the bill as it's drafted, because the government doesn't understand that the EFL doesn't represent 72 clubs. The EFL represents, to my mind, the championship clubs, because they've been trying to keep them desperately within the EFL for many years. And so the voting system in the EFL means that anything material that gets done has to have the consent of the championship clubs. So I've been saying for a number of years now, they don't represent me, they don't represent clubs down the lower league, yet the government feels that they do. So who can trigger the backstop, the much vaunted backstop provisions of the regulator? The only people who can do that are the EFL or the EPL. What about the rest of the pyramid, the National League? And as I say, the EFL doesn't represent me. So,
I would say, Mark, in respect of that observation, and I understand why you're saying it, I was there when the construct was changed, and there was a good reason why there was weighting given to the Championship, because clubs in League One and League Two didn't represent the Championship, and yet had an ability to change the direction of travel until the constitution was changed to give more weighting to the Championship. So there's a yin and a yang in that conversation.
Yeah, I understand that, but actually, if you stand back and look at the principles of this, and this is really what I think a regulator needs to do at a very high level, is to strategically look at, you might be able to package the championship clubs with the premiership clubs and have a better competition that you can sell. Mm-hmm. I don't mind that, as long as the money that comes into the game is distributed fairly. If that means the cake is bigger, then fantastic. But you've got to go away from this old thinking that you've got to nail the championship into the EFL, because what's happened over the years is it hasn't helped the championship, because you see where the championship is now, which is an actual financial mess, and it hasn't helped the lower league clubs either. So something has to change.
Mark, let me jump in. I mean, it's fair to say, and I will put this forward, in exchange for scrapping replays, the FA has got a commitment that no Premier League matches will take place on Cup final day or the day before. The finals will be moved to the penultimate weekend of the Premier League season. But let's say, Mark, your beloved Tranmere Rovers were to draw Simon's former club, Crystal Palace, in the Cup. And you get them at your place, and somehow you manage to draw 1-1. You're now denied the opportunity to go to their place to further the tie, to see if you can carry on where you left off at your own ground. Surely that can't be right, that you're denied that now.
Absolutely, and that, I'll go back even more recently in terms of, and a real example is we did that. We were 3-0 down at Watford when they were in the Premiership a few years ago. And at half time we were 3-0 down. We drew 3-3, took them back to one place and knocked them out. Fantastic. The fans remember that game. They remember the away game. They remember the home game. Now, there are very few opportunities. I'm coming back on the FA now, because on the fan aspect, there are very few opportunities for lower league fans to have those great days and those great memories. Liverpool fans, Man City fans, they're in the Champions League and so forth and so on. So good luck to them. But actually, for lower league fans, and there's a hell of a lot of them, judging by the response to our statement yesterday, they look at that and they really, and that's where the FA is wrong, because just to concoct the deal and say, well, the EFL are in on it because the professional game board on it. Okay, that's a separate professional game board, but did they consult the fans?
We'll try and get back with Mark Palios. That was Mark Palios en route to wherever he's en route to. One-time FA Chief Executive and now Tranmere Chairman. You can see it from both sides, I'm quite sure, but yours is a good question, Simon. You would like to think that he would not have done what Bullingham did.
Yeah, I mean, again, you look at the situation and you say the de facto regulator and governor of the game is the FA, right? Now, they should be the one looking after all aspects of English football, not looking after the Premier League. That's not their job, right? Their job is to make sure that they are governing all football. Now, with this in mind, you look at it and say the construction of governance. So if we have this poor governance issue, you have to look at football itself and the EFL and say, why have you not got better governance? Because ultimately what they're able to say is because somebody that was on the professional game board was in attendance ultimately and didn't raise the prerequisite objection or didn't do what was required, this has been waved through by others. So you've got to look at the construct of that. I do feel that the chairman from the lower leagues in the EFL making lots of noise will make little difference. But what it does do is it creates a tension around the regulator. I'm not for the regulator. I understand why others are. And I think that they will regret it one day.
Yeah.
But the point is the leverage that they want the regulator to have. This gives the regulator and those that want to appoint him and those that want to provide the legislation to underpin what the regulator is going to do more grist to their elbow.
Yeah,
but this isn't exactly why we want a regulator, though, isn't it? In this sort of situation, because you're suggesting then the FA should have been more robust in their negotiations.
What it is a negotiation going on. There's a bigger picture going on here. It's about distribution. It's the regulator's real value to everybody in English football, besides the fan-led review's perception of what fans think they're entitled to in terms of golden shares and how football clubs should be managed and fit and proper persons tests, is distribution. That's the battleground. Now, once you've got distribution, and that's what the regulator is useful for, because it's the one thing that the EFL have had in their armoury to use as leverage. Because what's their leverage before? We'll knock you out of our chin. We won't send clubs up from the Championship to the Premier League. That's their leverage. We'll play games at 3:00 and stop the watershed and all that sort of stuff.
Simon, to me, this fella Ryan, who's a Bedford Town fan, absolutely nails it. We were a successful non-league club in the 50s and 60s, including knocking out Newcastle of the FA Cup and taking Arsenal to a replay. The club folded in 1982, reformed in 1989, playing in a public park. But these were the highlights for us. He said, knocking Newcastle out the cup, taking Arsenal to a replay. This is a disgrace, this opportunity now being taken away for the account of boring, pointless, diluted European games which mean nothing to the majority of us fans. Ryan, what a message that is. Man, I'll get your take on that in just a second. FA Cup replays scrapped from the first round onwards. What does that mean for you as a fan of your club?
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.